and welcome to a special edition of The Point with me, Liu Xin, coming to you from Beijing. As the 2018 Winter Olympic Games continue in Pyeongchang, the Republic of Korea, all eyes are on the world's best skiers, skaters and winter sports athletes. Traditionally, European countries, especially Northern European countries, perform particularly well in winter sports. So what are the expectations for these countries' performance this year? And as we know, China will be hosting the Winter Olympic Games in 2022, and the Chinese capital city of Beijing will become the only city in the world to have hosted both the summer and winter games. So what can China learn from its Northern European counterparts in how to prepare for and stage a successful Winter Olympic Games? We have the special honor today of speaking with us the Norwegian ambassador to China, Geir O. Pedersen, to share his insights on winter sports and China-Norwegian ties. But before we start the interview, let's take a look at this background report.
The Scandinavian country of Norway boasts a proud and rich heritage when it comes to modern skiing. Over the years, skiing has evolved from being a practical means of transportation to a popular hobby and social sport. Today, skiing has become so popular in Norway, and the Norwegians have claimed plenty of fame over the world-class skiers, that it's often said that Norwegians are born with skis on their feet. Norway holds the record for the world's best performance in the history of the Winter Olympics. It has brought home 118 gold, 111 silver, and 100 bronze medals, totaling 329 medals over its participation in 22 Winter Games, with cross-country skiing and speed skating as the top medal-winning sports. In recent years, the Norwegian men's curling team has earned a reputation for their exuberant pants. The curling pants even have a fan page on Facebook with nearly 500,000 likes. Norway has successfully held 2 Winter Olympic Games, 1952 in Oslo and 1994 in Lillehammer. With its extensive experience in hosting Winter Games and cultivating winter sports culture, Norway would like to share its insights with China, which will be hosting the next Winter Olympics in 2022.
Beijing.
Compared with table tennis and badminton, the popularity of winter sports is much lower in China. When bidding for the 2022 Winter Olympics in 2014, China promised to engage 300 million people in the winter sports by 2025. Norwegian authorities also believe that cooperation on winter sports will bring Norway new opportunities, especially in terms of sports equipment, winter travel resources, and skiing education. However, cooperation between China and Norway goes beyond just winter sports. Following the normalization of bilateral relations in December 2016, the two countries have carried out increasingly intensive cooperation and exchange in fields such as trade, investment, and technology. Norway is one of China's important trading partners in Northern Europe, as well as one of China's main suppliers of fertilizer, aquatic products, and oil in Europe. According to the Statistics Bureau of Norway, the Nordic countries' marine product exports to China increased 26.4% in 2017 and is expected to keep growing in 2018, following the improvement to the policy on salmon's market access. China maintained its #1 position as Norway's largest trading partner in Asia, with machinery and transport equipment accounting for the top export commodity.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us today. Now, with a population of just 5.2 million, Norway has often been featured in the top 3 Winter Olympic Games medal count. How optimistic are you of the performance of Norwegian athletes this time in ROK?
I'm very optimistic and confident that we will do rather well. I believe we have very good chances, especially in cross-country skiing, biathlon, Nordic combined, and hopefully also with ski jumping. As you mentioned, we have a strong tradition of winter sports. We are actually the one nation that has won the most medals in the Winter Olympics. So it's something we're very proud of. So I hope we can live up to the expectations this time.
Very interesting of the strong tradition of winter sports. But let me come to that in just a moment.
Please.
First of all, we're all attracted, we're all very fascinated by these eye-catching pants that the Norwegian men's curling teams love to wear. Actually, there is on their Facebook page that I heard there are 500 million likes to these pants. So China is also trying to pick up some good strategies to make winter sports more aware among the general general public. What is the consideration of the Norwegian curling team to have such kind of eye-catching ideas?
This was something that started a few Winter Olympics back, and it was an immediate success. And if you see the fans, you understand why. It is remarkable what they have done. So it has increased interest for the sport and for the team, and I think this is a strategy that also others could pursue. You need to do something from time to time that actually increases the interest. First and foremost, of course, you need to do the sports well. But on top of that, maybe also some branding and a little bit of PR could help. And curling was, at the time when they did it, was not the most popular sport in Norway. But that really meant it had a great breakthrough.
Because of these pens?
Because of these pens. And added to that, they did also very well in that Olympics.
That's something that China would love to learn from, because China is also trying to do exactly the same thing, to make more people a fan of winter sports. By the way, Norway has successfully hosted 2 Winter Olympic Games. So will there be some concrete cooperation between China and Norway in helping Beijing to stage a successful one in 2022?
Yes, indeed. We are already cooperating with our Chinese friends. We have entered into a memorandum of understanding where we have already identified areas where we should cooperate. So Norwegian,
such as, if I may know?
Yes, indeed. So already we have Norwegian trainers working with the Chinese biathlon team. There are already, many young Chinese cross-country skiers that are in Norway for several months doing training. There are Chinese ski jumpers in Norway, and we're also discussing other areas of cooperation. And we are developing what we call an action plan to make sure that this develops together. But it's not only about the athletes, it's also about making the Winter Olympics itself successful. And we are discussing ways where we can cooperate in making sure that this will be an environmental friendly game, and of course also a game free from doping.
Of course, China has a little bit of a dilemma here. The Chinese people, except in the northeastern part of the city or northern part of the city, I would say the great majority of Chinese people are not born with a love for winter sports. China has 1.4 billion people almost, but our best standing so far is 5 gold medals in 2010 Winter Olympic Games. So in order to cultivate, train more world-class athletes, what is the strategy? What is the experience that Norway can share with China?
Very good question, and a bit complicated to answer, because I believe it's deeply embedded in our culture. We usually say that we are born with skis on our feet. And you know, when I grew up, the first thing I would do was to put on my skis. And I would go out, I would do cross-country skiing, I would be doing ski jumping, and all of this because the local community encouraged it. So it was part of the culture, was part of the local community, and we have a culture in Norway where you do things voluntarily and not paid for the activities. So all over Norway we had this kind of a culture, and it's a mass sport in Norway. Something we all participate in.
Like ping pong in China? Or?
I think that's a very good parallel, actually. And we could learn a lot when it comes to ping pong from China.
But is it possible for China also to pick up on the winter sports without the culture?
I think you can develop the culture. You have obviously the demographic potential. You have many new areas where you can go skiing, even just outside of Beijing. So it needs to be part, as I said, of the local culture, but it of course also needs government support. So what we've been doing is sort of building on the local culture, making sure that the government come in and give support. So we have, high schools where you will be training, very talented athletes, and then they will be supported through their careers. So you need a lot of different kinds of activities to succeed. But we are pretty confident that in a few years from now, China will become a very successful winter sport nation.
Speaking of the future or how China changes in a couple of years. I'm sure you're in a very good position to talk about the change that Chinese people have been experiencing, because you were in China some 30 years ago and you just came back to China as the Norwegian ambassador only last September, and you arrived in China at a critical moment when the 19th National Congress of the CPC was being held. So I'm going to switch the topic and talk about something different of your first impression of the country many years after you lived here, and your meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping right after you take up the new post.
First and foremost, I think if anyone had told me when I arrived in 1987 what China will look like today, we wouldn't have believed it. I do believe that this is close to a miracle, what has happened in China. The fight against poverty, in general the increase in living standards, what you have been able to achieve in your business, in your innovation, but also how you have been able to learn from your mistakes. I think very, very impressive. And what we now have seen, of course, is that the message was very clear from the Party Congress, that you are developing away from a focus only on economic growth and quantity to quality. And for us, and I think for the whole world, what is important is that we see that China will now develop a green economy, an ecological civilization, and also that you are taking a lead in the fight against climate change. All of this, I think, is very heartening to the international community. And also, I've been following very carefully, obviously, the speech of Xi Jinping at the Party Congress, but also his speech to the United Nations General Assembly in 2015, his speech to Davos and Geneva. And the message there, we do believe, is that China needs to respect international law, and it would strengthen and build the international community and international institutions. And these are priorities very much in line with the Norwegian interests.
Interesting moment you would recall during your meeting with President Xi?
Obviously, this is a formal event.
Of course.
I present my credentials on behalf, I'm representing the King of Norway. And we had a obviously very good discussion also about winter sports.
He's a big sports fan.
I've heard so, and I emphasized, like I did here with you, the importance of further deepening the cooperation between Norway and China when it comes to winter sports. What I didn't mention to you, but also mention, of course, there is also a commercial aspect to that. There is a lot of Norwegian businesses that have developed a lot of things that will be of interest also to the Chinese market. And then, of course, between Norway and China, there's also for many years been an interesting discussion about what are the strong sides of the Norwegian welfare model. And obviously, the more advanced China becomes, China wants to develop its health system, its pension system, its taxation system, and all of these areas. There's nothing that China can copy from others, but we can have mutual discussions and learn from each other in these areas.
Very important topic. I have been talking to Norwegian Ambassador to China, Geir Pedersen, and you're watching The Point. We'll take a short break and we'll be back right after that. Stay with us. Welcome back, and I have been having the honor to speak to His Excellency the Norwegian Ambassador to China, Mr. Geir Pedersen. So welcome back to this discussion once again. You were talking about the kind of potential cooperation China and Norway can explore. Indeed, very interesting period of time in China, because before we were focusing on the quantity of our growth. Now we're focusing on the quality of our growth, and that is why we are looking for best quality products, services, management experience, and Norway obviously has a lot to offer. There are these projects and these emphasis on innovation and projects on smart development between China and Norway. Could you tell us a bit more on those fronts, please?
Well, I think we've seen the last few years a very interesting development where both Norway and China we have developed our economies. Norway, as you rightly mentioned, have a very advanced economy. We put a lot of emphasis on innovation, and we have had this in nearly all important areas of our economy, in particular when it comes to energy, the maritime sector, and what we call smart cities. And we have then seen also an interest in these areas in China, where you have developed yourself. But we believe that this could be future areas of increased cooperation, where it would strengthen innovation in China and in Norway, and that we together could develop solutions for the future, especially we believe when it comes to green energy, where we know that this will be critical for China's development. But indeed, if China succeeds in this, the whole world will succeed. So that's why we have put emphasis on green energy, maritime sector, and also what we call the development of smart cities.
Right. So right now we have this mutual intent, mutual interest. Are there any projects already underway? Do we have some kind of vision of what's going to happen?
There are, especially within the maritime sector, there is a lot of things happening. But we also have in Shanghai actually a small community of startup activities with high-tech small companies or startups that have a vision that they want to sell and to introduce to the Chinese markets, where we have a lot of investors going in, and I believe that has a great potential to develop also the future cooperation. But China is for also a very important maritime market. Actually, it's the place where we build most of our ships, so that's also an important area.
I see Norway has a lot of passion for green development, for climate governance. You actually served as Norway's ambassador to the UN in New York, and while you were on active duty there, Norway was the first industrial nation and also the 18th overall to formally ratify the Paris Climate Change Agreement. We all know where we are at this particular moment. How do you look at the kind of potential role countries like China and Norway can play in terms of global climate governance?
I do believe that the beauty of the Paris Agreement is that we have all the small nations, the small island states, the small well-developed nations, and big states like China and the European Union. And we also had, of course, the United States with us during the presidency of Obama. Now there is a challenge because President Trump has withdrawn from the climate agreement. What I think we need to focus on is to make sure that we succeed even though President Trump has withdrawn. And I have noticed with great interest that American cities, American states, American businesses, they are still committed to this. But here I think Norway can lead by example, China can lead by example, and this is indeed what I see happening. Especially since the 19th Party Congress, the vision that comes out from the Party Congress, and what we have seen just here in Beijing during the winter is amazing with the new weather. But all of this, we believe, is in the interest of the Chinese people, but also of the global community, that we see that the fight against climate change is possible and it is necessary. Because without the success in the fight against climate change, it will have a tremendous negative impact on all of us. And Norway has also taken concrete actions. China has taken concrete actions. And I think to show leadership in this area is so important to prove that it is possible to fight climate change.
And one curiosity question maybe, Norway is already so developed, your air quality, your environment is already very, very well preserved. Why do you still see environmental preservation, green energy so important?
Because in the global world or the global community today, no nation is an island. We all depend on each other. That goes for trade, and it goes for the climate, and it goes for security. And climate change is a challenge to humankind as such. And we as Norwegians, even though we are only 5.2 million, we also have a responsibility, and we feel that responsibility. Of course, it will also have an impact on our communities. But the most important thing here is that we live together in the world that we have inherited, and as such, we also take the responsibility seriously.
You talk about responsibility. Do you see it as a burden or an opportunity?
This is a very good question, because I think we have to stop looking at it as a burden. It is an opportunity, and it's an opportunity to develop our business, our enterprises, and our communities in a better way. Cleaner air, cleaner earth, cleaner water, and of course to fight all the environmental degradation that has been going on since the beginning of the industrial age. And I think if we look at it as an opportunity, and I do believe that business now starts to look at it as an opportunity, investors are looking at it as an opportunity, then we will succeed.
What about the trade relationship between China and Norway? Let's talk about some bilateral trade here. China is Norway's largest trading partner in Asia, and there is this negotiation on establishing a free trade agreement between these two countries. What is the progress so far?
It's been a good progress. We will have the next round of negotiations most probably in May in Norway, and I think it's our ambition that this will help to take down barriers for the trade, so open up for a better cooperation between Norway and China when it comes to their economies. And I'm hopeful that we will be able to make even further progress in May this year. And China and Norway has what I would call complementary economies. You know, we have a lot of things that China has an interest for, and you have a lot of things that we want to buy. So this should hopefully be possible to achieve.
So free trade is still the direction to go.
For Norway, free trade is extremely important. We are very committed to this. And here I do believe we have a joint interest, and that should also be why it should be possible, hopefully, to find an agreement in this area.
Finally, China's relationship with Norway is also being looked at in the context of the Nordic region with China. There is this talk of a possible agreement of setting up a 5+1 dialogue mechanism between China and Nordic governments, possibly drawing inspiration from the 16+1 talk mechanism between China and Central and Eastern European countries. Could you give us some more details on this front?
Yes, as you know, the Nordic countries, we share a lot in common. We have very advanced economies. We have, stable democracies. We share the same values. But obviously there are also important differences. You know, for instance, Norway was, as I say, colonized by Denmark for 400 years. We were in the union with Sweden for a few years. Finland the same with Sweden, so there are many things. So there's not all issues we see eye to eye on. But we have tried to strengthen our cooperation with other countries also internationally. And I do believe there are areas where we could develop a closer relationship and cooperation with China on. And one of the areas we are discussing is the Sustainable Development Goals. The Nordic countries are strongly committed to this. China is strongly committed to this. So this is one of the things that our prime ministers have suggested, that this perhaps could be one area where we could start to look at it, and then we could see how it develops from there.
We hope that there will be fruits on these cooperation projects we have mentioned on smart city cooperation or free trade agreement or 5+1 China and Nordic regional cooperation. Many thanks. A lot of interesting topics, but we have to leave it there. My guest has been His Excellency the Norwegian Ambassador to China, Mr. Geir Pedersen, and you have been watching The Point with me, Liu Xin. As always, you can follow me on Facebook or Twitter using the handle The Point with LX. Download the application called CGTN to watch the show on your mobile devices, or go to YouTube and look for CGTN The Point. Thanks for watching. We've got The Point.